All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's 2 o'clock, and thanks for joining us for McKonly Asbury's virtual summer series, CEO Perspectives in Challenging Times. We're thrilled to have you all here with us today, and we can't wait to introduce you to Dana Hanchin, who's kicking off our series with us. My name is Janice Snyder, and I'm a partner here at McKonly Asbury and the Director of Audit and Assurance Services. Here with me today is Gary Dubitz, who's also one of my partners and the director of our nonprofit services. Gary, would you like to say hello?
Absolutely. Hopefully everybody's having a great day and we're going to have a great hour.
Great. Thanks, Gary. We're grateful to be your host today. For those of you that don't know, McKonly Asbury is an accounting and business advisory services firm with offices in Camp Hill, Lancaster, and Bloomsburg. We provide a range of services across a variety of industries, and we're pleased here today with HDC Mid-Atlantic. We have our affordable housing industry, and they're also a nonprofit. So we're pleased to share that with you, and if you want more information, you can always visit our website. Before I turn things over to Gary, I do want to mention that today's session is meant to be an open dialogue, so we would love to see you, for those of you who are willing to turn your cameras on. We also welcome you to use the chat feature. You see I left an initial message in there. So please submit questions, because the more we can answer your questions, the more interesting and lively this will be. And I'm sure Dana would love to hear those as well. If we do run out of time, we'd be happy to continue the conversation, but we're going to try and manage it and make sure we leave 10 or 15 minutes at the end so we can address questions that are coming in through the audience. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Gary.
Sure. Hey, thanks, Janice. And also one other point about McKonly Asbury, we are open for business, always looking for new opportunities. Absolutely. So I just want to put that in. The partners wanted me to say that, so I threw that in there as well. So, hey, I have the opportunity, the pleasure to introduce Dana Hanchin, President and CEO of HDC Mid-Atlantic. McKonly Asbury and HDC go back decades. And in fact, HDC is in its 50th year as an organization serving the community based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We've enjoyed the relationship for years and years, and we're just so excited to have Dana join us today. Dana joined HDC back in 2018, and as president and CEO, and has done remarkable things for HDC in that short time period. She has over 25 years of experience in addressing complex needs of the lower income community, including affordable housing initiatives, specializing in real estate development, affordable housing finance, and community development. She has had various positions before she joined HDC, including positions with Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, Women's Community Revitalization Project, Local Initiative Support Corporation, which I looked at GuideStar, and that's a huge organization based in New York City. So another dynamic organization. She also worked for the city of Philadelphia as well in various positions. So one other final thing I wanted to say about Dana is she recently received the National NeighborWorks Association's 2021 Emerging Leader Award. That's pretty cool. That really is. NeighborWorks is a national organization for the affordable housing community. So Dana is getting national recognition. And again, we're happy to have her here. And Dana, let me turn it over to you.
Thanks, Gary, and thank you, Janice and McKonly Asbury, for inviting me to kick off your summer series, CEO Conversations, No Pressure, National Award, first one out of the gate. So hopefully we can make it lively and really encourage everyone to put your comments or questions in the chat box, and there'll be a Q&A at the end that we'll be able to answer those. As Gary had shared, our relationship with McKonly Asbury is decades long. I went to my CFO, who has been here at HDC for over 30 years, and she can't remember a time that she didn't work with McKonly Asbury. So I'm so grateful for the partnership and the support that you provide to HTC to make sure that we have a strong foundation, solid balance sheet, and making sure that we are doing everything in the right ways in advance of supporting our mission. So I can't thank you enough. And as Gary said, I came to HTC 3 years ago, hailed from Philadelphia, doing all of my work in affordable housing, dedicating my life's work to addressing social and economic justice issues with a particular lens of housing and housing stability as a cornerstone for economic mobility and growth. So came out here to lead HTC 3 years, and it's been a really fantastic ride at an opportunity where HTC is interested and was willing to take our work to the next level. So we're celebrating 50 years. And currently we serve over 4,000 residents in 55 affordable housing communities, over 3,000 apartments, and we have a 3-state footprint, though the large part of our portfolio is here in Pennsylvania. With over 135 employees, have an $11 million operating budget and over $100 million in assets. I will also share some other big numbers as we are celebrating our 50th year. We have done some research and calculated that we have served and touched the lives of over 50,000 residents in 50 years. That's the size of a small city. I think Lancaster is just around 60,000. If you think about that kind of impact, it's pretty amazing. And also have invested over $325 million in developing and in managing affordable housing across the footprint. So we are excited to honor that legacy, and we are really looking forward to the future and what comes next for HTC. And I'll be speaking a lot about that in our remarks. You can see on the screen who we are. We are all about our residents. That's the heart of our mission, and we are driven by our values. We build and operate affordable rental housing. We also provide support services to our families and individuals who reside in that housing, recognizing that often there could be one crisis away or emergency from losing that housing, or if there are other things they want to work on to sort of fulfill their dreams and achieve their goals. We are there, right there to support them by providing access to benefits, to resources, and other programs. So we are not just about building homes, we're about building hope. And we really believe ourselves to be a long-term partner in communities because we're in it for the long haul. We're not just in there to build housing and walk away. We have 35-year commitments, even beyond 50-year commitments to strengthen communities. And we work closely with our neighbors and stakeholders who are invested in the values and the belief that housing is a human right to continue to meet that need. As you know, this pandemic has shown that housing is really the cornerstone for people's health and safety. And we're gonna keep meeting that need and also work on some of the systemic issues that actually get in the way of being able to provide that access to everyone. So these are our core lines of business. I'd spoken about affordable housing development. We build affordable housing primarily through the low-income housing tax credit program, which may be foreign to many of you, but is basically an indirect federal subsidy that incentivizes the private market to participate and provide affordable housing. The reason why we need that is because if it was profitable, it would already be happening. So we need to incentivize them to participate and really figure out how to meet the housing needs at the incomes of where people are. So oftentimes people are earning incomes and the market rents are too high. So we provide that housing where people can find housing at incomes that are below market rate. Over nearly 85% of our families or individuals earn less than $30,000 a year. And in many of our markets, and particularly some of our more challenging markets, average household incomes range between $5,000 and $17,000. So we're really working with families who need this housing. Often they are working, but not earning enough to be able to afford a market rate apartment. And we do property management. So we recognize that the best person to care for and manage our properties is the owner, the parent. and recognizing we've been doing that for 50 years as well. And we also do that third-party management for other owners, and again, provide resident services.
Thank you, Dana. That was a great introduction and background on HDC. 50,000 residents in 50 years. That's just amazing. And I love how you are building hope. So we have a couple of questions on the slide here, but we really want to start with your people initiatives. And you mentioned it in your intro. You're certainly doing a lot around diversity and inclusion opportunities at HDC and within the residents that you serve. So I would love to start with that question. So tell us how you create those opportunities at HDC.
Absolutely. So what was really exciting to me about stepping into this leadership role was recognizing that HTC was in a position to chart a new direction or a next level for the work that they had set forth in the past. And one of the key projects that I worked on initially was put together a 5-year strategic plan. And from that planning process, we identified as our leading goal is to advance equity in our organization and in our communities. And I want to share a little bit why that's important to us. And as you know, housing in terms of historical, institutional, and systemic barriers that have been in practice that have limited opportunity and increased barriers for communities and people of color, and that we have a responsibility as an affordable housing developer, a nonprofit, with a mission to serve residents, to create a welcoming, safe place to call home for everyone, to begin to look at those systemic issues and remove those barriers and address them to sort of change the conditions and improve access and opportunity for everyone. And if you want to read more about the historical and practices, not only in terms of redlining, predatory lending, race-based zoning, federal policies actually that systematically removed opportunities for people of color, I would encourage you to read Richard Rothstein's Color of Law. It's a great book. It's a dense book, but there's also a wonderful 18-minute video if you are more about animated film, less reading. It's a great resource, and hopefully I'll pass that on to Gary and Janice to share with you. So for us, we thought it was very important to advance this as one of our leading goals in our strategic plan. And this was we just finished our strategic plan in 2019, and then had planned to launch it in 2020. And of course, the pandemic hit, right? And that's the last thing you want as a new leader, to have this great plan and all of a sudden you have this world of uncertainty in front of you. Coupled with that, the challenges and the conversations around racial divides and George Floyd, and recognizing that even within the pandemic, we have to have a dialogue and an ability to act within that, because the moment was now. And even though we may not have felt ready to have those conversations and think about those plans in the middle of COVID-19, we felt it was our responsibility to act and to start thinking about how do we look at that within our organization to continue advancing those important values that is really now the path forward for HDC. So, and I will also share that we are learners in this work. And at the same time being learners, we're also seen now as leaders, because we try things on, we fail, we succeed, and we learn. And but we push ourselves to be bold and brave. And from that process and that sort of bravery and vulnerability that you need to explore these issues, we formed an 18-member cross-departmental employee work group to look at how we would start having those conversations and developing goals within HDC. Initially, we were looking closely at board diversity and making sure that our board is representative of the communities that we serve. Of course, like many organizations and companies across the United States, we issued public anti-racism and call to action statements. As an affordable housing developer who needs land to actually advance our mission, we felt it was important also to acknowledge the land and honor the indigenous people who traditionally steward that land, to start just building history and knowledge of our past to inform how we engage with the future. And we established June 19th as a paid holiday. We also instituted additional trainings around diversity and inclusion, with specifically around implicit bias and microaggression training for all employees. And we took a hard look at some of our own practices and policies to figure out how we can ourselves remove those barriers. For instance, with our resident selection criteria, how we select tenants within our communities, and what we can be doing differently to understand individual stories and their experience as we evaluate whether or not they would be a good community member. So I'm just going to talk real high level about the goals that we identified. And these may be goals that you can think about within your own organizations, and how you could think about advancing equity, equity within there. So we really believe in equitable program service delivery. So across all lines of business, one of the things we want to do is use an equity lens. And what an equity lens is to really say, are the decision makers, are the people who are impacted by our decisions at the table and influencing how we're making the decisions, and what's the intended outcomes, and what could be the unintended consequences. So oftentimes we have good intentions about our business decisions, but then the impact in terms of whether it's your client or your residents could be adverse. And having them around the table to help influence and inform you is a really important part of that process. So we're taking a look at developing a series of questions to make sure that we have engaged at multiple levels as we are reviewing our programs. Another really great way to think about it is through business diversity and equity. So as a nonprofit housing developer, we have significant purchasing power. We think about our real estate development projects that are roughly around $15 million a piece. And we are operating 55 communities across 3 states in terms of the vendors and suppliers, the contractors, our professional services, our banking institutions. We want to work with people to make sure that they align with our values, and that are committed to the same goals that we are. And that we want to be able to figure out how we can do more to invest in local businesses, minority businesses, and women businesses. So that's a big goal for us and what we're trying to achieve. The other piece is, and I would say this is a big piece we've been working on within the last year, is around creating a diverse and inclusive workforce and culture. You can't do any of this unless you establish trust and build knowledge and skills to have conversations that are uncomfortable, which is one of the tenets of doing this work, and recognizing that it's hard conversations, and they're conversations that are always you're learning. And this is a journey, as you see on our commitment statement here, that we're on together, and it will never end. So if you're going to do this work, it's a commitment forever, because it is just like any other sort of practice that you're doing within your organization. It's an applied discipline and an intentionality that you wake up with every day. It's like living your values, your values of your organization. So, and with that, we're doing a lot of work around skill building, knowledge building, making sure people understand history and the facts, and sort of be able to engage around their own personal experience and how it relates to HDC in terms of our operations. Also the way that we engage each other to make sure we are creating an inclusive and welcoming space for any employee, and also to make sure that residents are received in that same way. And then finally, a larger equity goal we're working on is, again, as I mentioned, a diverse and inclusive board of directors. And they're engaged in training right now to be able to learn together as a group, and that they're aligned with management as they explore in what ways from a governance level that they can begin to frame out an equity lens as well. So that's a lot of stuff that I put around our commitment to diversity and inclusion.
That certainly was a lot. Thank you, Dana. I can see your passion coming through, and just how passionate you and HDC are about their commitment to racial equity. And I love that you said you are learners and becoming leaders. So learners and leaders. And I think we could all learn a lot from that statement.
Well, and I would say, Janice, that people are saying that we're leaders, and we're like, no, we're learners, but we're willing to share. And that's the case, because we've made, you're gonna make mistakes, but really being able to step into the work and just try things on and be committed every day to continue learning and just adapting.
Great. We had a question come in the chat right around this topic before I move on to a related more on the people. How would you say your dialogue around racial and social equity is going? And what are your matrices of determining success?
That's a great question, because what we've just built out is our framework for our goals. And now we're beginning to define what success looks like for those goals. So I'll particularly talk a little bit about sort of our goals related to business diversity and equity. And really, we're at a place of assessing what is our total purchasing power, who are we doing business with, so what's our baseline, and then what is realistic for us to establish as a goal over the next 3 years. So for example, I've been talking a lot about this number, but we still have to sort of do our research to find out, is it possible? What is realistic to achieve? And that's a 20% sort of commitment to support women, minority, and local businesses through our contracting, through our supplier chain. But we are in the process of meeting and with practitioners who are ahead of us with subject matter expertise on it to sort of define those goals. So we're in the middle of defining those success measures right now. And the first part of the question was, how's the conversation going? So from our 18, and it's really important, we have an 18-member cross-team working group. And what we have done is we instituted ways in which the full organization can participate in learning about racial equity. So we have a virtual discussion series that we hold once a month on various topics. It actually focuses in on equity issues, inclusion issues, diversity issues, and it could be from a range of different perspectives, whether it's about a housing lens or around Indigenous people and understanding land acknowledgements, looking at the language that we use, having common language. So building knowledge and capacity to just build understanding and engagement. We also institute every week, we have a weekly Zoom call on Fridays. It's an all staff call. We kind of carry it out like a talk show. So we always have a segment on Ready. We actually call it Ready, Set, Go, where we have celebrate or recognize, every month it could, like this month is, Gay Pride. So we may focus on Gay Pride. We may talk about, a few months ago, we talked about Autism Month, and we are working on a special project to serve individuals with intellectual disabilities as in Allentown. So we always try to highlight an issue and then bring it back to the mission and the work of HTC so they can see those connections. And so I think we're trying to figure out what engagement looks like across the organization while we're still building out our framework and our plan. And then we hope that it gets bigger and bigger in terms of that engagement.
Great. Thanks, Dana. I love that, how you're looking at it through the lens of residents, employees, and the communities that you're in. When you talk about the Gay Pride and focusing on that and autism and intellectual disabilities, it's definitely a broad perspective and broad approach. So I want to ask a little bit, as we're looking at all these buckets, we talked a lot about residents and then things you're doing internally with your employees, but how are you focused on engaging your employees and keeping your employees? That is a hot topic everywhere, every organization I talk to. I can hardly be in a meeting where someone isn't trying to hire or trying to keep great talent. So I want to hear a little bit about how HTC is tackling that.
Yeah, it's a great question to grapple with right now, as the labor market is incredibly tight. So I think a lot about attracting great talent. I think we have the best people at HTC. I want to do a shout out to Derek Herbert, who I see on our screen. He's our Director of Asset Management, very talented employee, very committed. All of our employees are incredibly committed and dedicated to our mission. And I say that not as a blanket statement, but I say it because, COVID has impacted organizations and in ways that are really sort of incredibly challenging, but also there are these nuggets of gifts, right, that you learn or that you experience. And one of the things that came out through HTC's experience was how, every employee that was here, I would say, we were facing uncertainty, but we were being positive, and we were communicating, and we were united in our understanding. When you think about like housing being, the cornerstone for stability, we understood that our job was to keep our residents and our communities as safe and healthy as possible. And the work and the effort and the commitment and passion that's shown through, just by the sake of understanding the base level thing we need to do was to stay alive, right? That's what we were all focused on. And so I was just incredibly overwhelmed with gratitude and with how everyone stepped up. No one was looking at job descriptions about what they should be doing or not be doing. We did everything that we could to ensure our employees' health and safety. We provided flexibility. We worked with whatever situation they had. And I think we have the best people on board. And we offer an environment where we really try to, just like we do with our residents. I mean, a lot of the participants on the call are nonprofits, is that we meet people where they are, and we recognize that, if you're getting the work done and you have challenges that you may be dealing with, like, we're going to work with you through that, because we recognize that creates loyalty, right? Like there's an organizational interest in making that investment to just sort of really support people through the challenge of the pandemic, but always trying to engage them, just like I talked about with the equity lens in terms of the end user of our residents and understanding impact. We have an employee engagement committee. We also do small pulse surveys to check in, like, how are they feeling? Are they satisfied? Do they feel heard? Do they feel valued? Those are the things that we ask and what we emphasize with our employees. I will also share that as part of our equity work, one of the things we're working on is a compensation analysis. And I think we're going to get to that a little bit later on, but we haven't completed one for quite some time. And we wanted to do that particularly with a lens around equity. And making sure that we're doing everything we can to provide the quality of life of our employees and make sure that we are paying them the value that that we believe they have, not just what the market is, but really trying to say, so for example, like in Pennsylvania, the minimum wage is ridiculously low, right? And we know you can't survive on that, but we're making a commitment to strive for moving the organization to at all levels to a livable wage. And right now, I believe we are at where, regardless of where you are and your role, you're earning for our essential workers, our custodians, you're earning $15 an hour. And that's really what the market is too, because they can go and run to Amazon and pack boxes for $22 an hour. So what makes them stay here? It's the community, it's the support. We also offer from the get-go 4 weeks vacation, PTO. And that goes up over time the longer that you're here, and recognizing that many people are managing families, and if you're only getting the minimum, I mean, after you're sick, your kids are sick, and all these other things you have to manage, when do you really have time to sort of take care of yourself and have self-care? So and another thing that we do is just have a lot of transparency and making sure we're always explaining why we're doing things. Employees may not be happy all the time, but at least we can provide an explanation of why decisions are being made and how we're moving forward, so that there's transparency in our planning and our actions.
Great.
I mean, and I would just wanted to add to the why we think this is important, and it's really around our belief systems that we believe that every employee can influence and can be a leader and has a voice, and we continually try. We're not perfect, and our organization is large and has layers. So I can speak at a level where I can feel and hear that and engage in that, but really trying to make sure that we're transforming our culture across the organization so people do feel that they have a voice and can contribute to HDC's growth.
Great. Thanks, Dana. I like how you shared a lot of things you're doing around employee engagement, and particularly that living wage with 4 weeks vacation and, you know, lowest earners making $15 an hour. So I think that that's very helpful to focus on your employees in that way. I didn't have any other questions around people initiatives. If Gary would like to take over with our next topic. So I know Gary's going to move us into the path forward in a moment.
So, yeah, so once I get off a mute, I can start. So topic 2 is path forward. And a lot of things that we've already talked about certainly is looking forward, but we wanted to dive into maybe some additional things regarding the path forward. You know, one thing that Dana mentioned earlier was that, so back in 2019, they went and did a strategic plan and spent a lot of time on that. I was very impressed with the depth that they went to in terms of putting together that strategic plan. And you may want to talk a little bit about that, you know, Dana, because it really was a dynamic process without a doubt. But then you know, you had the strategic plan and you were using it on a day-to-day basis. Then the pandemic hits, and suddenly that gets kind of easily can be put aside, and like, you know, you literally had to work day to day, you know, to keep people safe and to do really basic things. So, so now we're trying to get out on the other side of the pandemic and move forward. So. Tell me how you handled that strategic plan and how are you forging ahead now as we hopefully are closing the pandemic era?
Yeah, certainly. So, you know, strategic planning process, just in terms of what I'm sharing, a core value of ours is around collaboration and engagement. So that process involved even a larger committee than the 18-person cross-sector work group for racial equity. It involved the board of directors. It involved, you know, every role that that we could plug in terms of whether you're maintenance or community manager, you're in finance or accounting, in property management, in real estate development. Really took a very integrated and comprehensive approach to know that everyone had to own that plan at the end of the day, because, you know, as a leader, I need them. I need to implement the plan. And I think many organizations were in this place when the pandemic hit, where there was so much uncertainty, and you sort of step back and sort of stress tested, right? And looked at where you're sort of were exposed and where you think you could be vulnerable in your organization, and what kind of mitigants you can put in place immediately to take care of that, you know. And everyone like went home. I remember like packing up the office and thinking you're going to be back in 8 weeks, right? And as slowly as you're moving through that, and so we shifted very well to remote work, and was so appreciative of how smooth that was. I don't know if it was serendipity or our IT provider and all of our technological sort of our equipment, but you know, there was a realization. We had a COVID task force that met every day, sometimes, you know, for 2 to 4 hours, just dealing with the uncertainty as it was rolling out and communicating on a regular basis. But there's a point of realizing, wow, we're going to be in this place for quite some time. And so how do we begin to not only just look at how we get through the day to day, but where do we get back to looking at the low hanging fruit, I would say, from the strategic plan that we can still advance, that's not going to be hindered. It may be slower, but that we can still sort of latch onto and begin to move at the same time, because we just didn't want to be in crisis mode. You know, when we were able to sort of create a system to manage that crisis, then we realized that we could also sort of get back to some of those goals in the strategic plan. So, you know, and in terms of forging ahead, you know, I would say that, you know, for us, least this year coming into January, in terms of the work that we were doing and how we were responding to the community and our residents, and making sure when there was disclosed confirmed cases that we were doing, following all the protocols. But once the vaccine became available, we knew it was coming available soon, we shifted into a vaccination education campaign, not only for our residents, but for our employees as well, to make sure they had the facts, that they had good information to make, I would say, a very good decision for themselves and their family and communities, and for employees, for their coworkers. So we were working very, very diligently on that campaign across our communities. And I was thrilled that we were able to bring back reopen our home office on June 1st. We have 43 employees at our home office, and we have an 87% vaccination rate. So that to me felt to be a very successful sort of marker to start to now sort of make the transition back into the workplace. And we also ended up identifying through the pandemic about 8 to 9 positions that would become permanently remote. So we made some adjustments, in the process. And for us, forging ahead in the pandemic means that we're still, we went through this planning process for 2021 on what we could accomplish in terms of our strategic plan goals and our operational goals. And we've been holding steady on implementing that. We are very concerned, I will say, in 2021 with our residents, because, the challenges around job loss and reduction of hours and the eviction moratorium that's in place to ensure housing stability. We need to collect the rents of our communities and of our residents in order to operate our business. So last year, we were very successful in being able to hit our performance targets for both our family and our senior communities. But this year we're seeing it a little bit differently, where our family properties we have this downward trend in collection, even though we've worked super hard to ensure that residents have access to all the rent relief programs they can, that we have gone after all the government resources that are available for nonprofits like HDC. But we're really concerned sort of that we maybe have a lag in terms of the sort of impact that we thought we were going to feel out of the gate last year, it will be happening now. So in terms of forging ahead, I look a lot at what is the risk around the pandemic, because we're not quite through it yet. I feel like I'm excited to say, we used to get regular disclosures of confirmed cases in our communities at the height, especially around the holidays. We haven't had a confirmed case shared at HGC for quite some time, which is great. But the sort of economic ramifications are still being felt by our families, and we are working really closely with our residents to make sure that they are communicating with us where they are, how we can help them, putting together an action plan so that we can continue to support them as they get back on their feet. So, and the question about how are you staying focused on your residents and mission? I mean, I would say we never lost that focus. It even became more narrow in terms of the support and things that we needed to do to help our residents. But I mean, our mission, and I know this is connects a lot to the next sort of conversation around partnerships, but we've been able to develop new partnerships, even through this last year, and really find out who are the partners we want to work with that align with our values and the way that we want to sort of engage in the world when there is a crisis, and we're trying, to make sure that everyone can sort of weather through it. So, I'm just incredibly grateful for such a dedicated staff that show up every day and just have such a passion of service for the work that we do.
On a day-to-day basis, nonprofit organizations have a challenge of they're so busy, they're close to being overwhelmed with the amount of work that's out there for them to do on a day-to-day basis. how do you at HDC keep that mission top of mind for people as they're working on a day-to-day basis doing what they do?
Well, the organizing framework we have beyond the strategic plan is that we do go through, and I'm sure a lot of nonprofits and organizations have their business plans, right? Their organizational work plans. We have a master work plan with our top priority goals, which is what that goes across teams. And if I think about, we have, and then by department, every department has their own work plan that supports those strategic and operational goals. And then every individual understands their role within that departmental work plan. And so that is our guiding roadmap forever. And quite frankly, as a leader, I'm relentless on the level of planning and application of making sure that what we're doing is in line with where we want to go, the goals we want to achieve, and course correcting or reprioritizing, and making sure that we're focused on the things that we're not following shiny objects, or if we're getting overwhelmed with a challenge, that we come together as a team and we think about what are those solutions to that, so we can take care of it, put ourselves on a path of corrective action and implement it. So we've done a lot of things internally within the leadership team. I have a great executive team in which we brainstorm big ideas and questions, and then we also spend time on solutions where we have problem solving. So it's not just up to a singular department, but it is this cross sort of collaboration effort where everyone has a perspective, that diverse perspective, whether it's about diverse skill sets or expertise, or points of view or lived experience, that all adds value in tackling challenges as you're trying to carry out your plans. We also put together a balanced scorecard that looks at, I think there was a question that came in the chat about how do you define success. So in each one of our goals for our strategic plan, we have measures of success, and we report out them on quarterly. And, very simply, it shows everybody where we are, green, yellow, red, right? In terms of being able to get a snapshot and where we may need to, how much effort we may need to apply in order to achieve that goal by end of year. So that is a really an important tool that I use in making sure that we are staying focused on what we want to achieve.
It's really impressive what you're doing there, because nonprofit organizations, so often the word strategic doesn't necessarily come to mind. They're out there working hard on their mission, and being able to really break it down into goals by department, again, towards your mission, and being able to have that accountability on a day-to-day basis is really impressive. And whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit, for those on this call, those are things that are key to having dynamic organizations, successful organizations.
I agree, Gary. You talked a lot, Dana, about being in crisis mode in the last year, and I think a lot of us can relate to that. All the things that were happening, but you said you never lost focus on your mission and your strategic plan. You also mentioned that your 2021 with your residents, you're seeing some different challenges with job losses, eviction moratoriums. It kind of goes hand in hand with, is that requiring you to have more fundraising? Was there lost fundraising or opportunities or things you encountered over the last year? And what do you see looking forward?
So I will share that this isn't my first rodeo when it comes to impact on residents, and sort of 2008 with the collapse of the housing market. I worked for the city of Philadelphia administering a federal relief program. And so I would say because of that experience and instinctively, we prepared ourselves for understanding that this is going to hit hard. Federal relief will come in some form. Let's prepare ourselves for that and what that looks like. And so from the get-go, when we went into the sort of depths of the pandemic, we reached out to every single resident. Our resident services coordinators had just had so much value in the process of making that personal connection. And I'm not talking about letters or emails. I'm talking about calling people on the phones and saying, how are you feeling? What are you concerned about? What is your situation? Here are resources that can help you. So last year we were able to secure nearly $250,000 directly to residents to support them through rent relief programs. And they're not easy to go after, right? I mean, but this is what HTC does because we're used to government money, and we could run through those hurdles and support residents, alongside them to access those resources. Because at the end of the day, it helps them, but it helps us and our business model, right? Because it provides the support or the rental income that we need to continue our financial stability. So very early on, we mobilized, and we're in 13 counties in 3 states. So in many cases, we had to learn the different ways in which these resources were coming out, not only to residents, but then also to the organization. And I know that Derek's on here. He was keeping a detailed spreadsheet on all the resources we were able to bring into HTC through the COVID relief funds. And I think it was close to $2 million, but that may be executive liberty that I'm using. I'm rounding up too much. But our $1.8 million we're able to bring in through COVID, which is an anomaly, right? So I told my board, this is related to COVID. I don't think you can expect, our trajectory in terms of our fundraising to be the same in 2021. But we were just able to mobilize and create systems and tracking. Everyone played a unique role in making that happen, and just making sure that we were connected to our residents and ready to support them to help them access those resources as well.
Great, thank you. I know we're getting close to the end of our time. I don't know, Gary, if there's any specific questions you want to ask that have come in.
Well, one thing regarding partnerships, and we talked a little bit about this before we got on here with Dana, was collaboration. That's huge in the nonprofit world now, and being able to work with other nonprofits and to provide a comprehensive services to, for instance, for HTC's residents. And one we talked about was your collaboration with the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank. So, you're providing housing, but you also were looking at the basic needs of food. And so tell us a little bit about that collaboration.
Absolutely. And I see that Joe is joining us today. He just said thank you in the chat. So shout out to the PA Central Pennsylvania Food Bank. They are really one of our most treasured partnerships that we have across our footprint. In many of our communities, we serve as a distribution site for access to food, and the challenges, as many of you know are on this call who understand the needs of lower income families and individuals, is that housing stability is important, but even with affordable housing, families and individuals are still struggling with food insecurity. I mean, and that I was overwhelmingly a need through the pandemic, and continues to be a growing need. So we are grateful we already had that partnership in place, and we didn't, we made sure that basic need was continued to be met, in our communities. And so we love, everyone, and I think I would just want to share, this has all been sort of in thinking about new partnerships and collaborations. I also think COVID taught us, okay, who aren't our partners, right? And I'm sure that nonprofits and organizations have said, you know what, we're not seeing things the right way here. Should we really be in this together? Especially in a time of crisis where you need to trust each other and build off those trusting relationships to solve problems and make things happen along that sort of share those values. So, we did have situations where we walked away from partners, and we thought it may have impacted HTC in terms of revenue or income, but at the same time, we just felt like, now's the time to live our values and manage a plan for sustainability and be able to be really clear about who we want to work with and why we work with them. And so, there were some hard decisions that we made last year, but ultimately I think I think we're stronger because of them. I think, we are doing a project here in the city of Lancaster, working with a private market developer to reuse a former hospital campus that has gone vacant and dormant in a relatively stable part of the neighborhood. That otherwise, when you see these hospitals that leave or schools that are no longer in use, they sit abandoned for decades upon decades. But through a collaboration through the city and through some key local stakeholders and a private market developer, we entered into a partnership to repurpose that campus into a mixed income, mixed use project for the city that will serve low income families for rental housing, as well as market rate rental housing and home ownership, market rate home ownership, and retail and commercial. So, and we were able to have 2 local foundations step up to help fill the gap significantly, which is an anomaly, right? It's not, people say, oh, is this a best practice or a model? I'm like, no, it's a lot of relationship building. And it's almost something where the replication of it requires so much resource, but with a commitment of partners, we were able to make it happen. So those are just some exciting things that happened. And I will mention, we're growing in other parts of the state, particularly in Northeast Pennsylvania, through a nonprofit who was committed to affordable housing, but no longer wanted to, could no longer operate or own those communities, and wanted to work with a provider that shared their values and their commitment and passion for affordable housing. So we're looking to expand in the Northeast by the end of the year, bring on another 150 apartments in 5 communities. So and I just can't stress enough in terms of the conversations and that sort of shared values as being the critical element of how new partnerships, for us, it came about during COVID because, it was just really an incredible time. I'm just so proud of our team for sort of continuing to forge ahead on those bigger goals that, again, we could have just been focused on day-to-day, operate, keep them safe. But there were these opportunities that, we felt so important to cultivate and see through.
Great. Thanks, Dana. I have so many notes and so many takeaways here, from your learners and leaders on racial equity to workforce and culture and living wage, to your focus on your residents, your mission, and your strategic plan throughout the crisis, and the amazing partnerships in determining who's right and who's not, which is probably equally important. I would like to hear from you for our audience, because maybe they've have a lot of great takeaways as well. But what are the 3 things you would just like to emphasize for everyone listening today as something they can take away, or really, there's so much to learn from HDC today and from the things you're doing there. But if you could come up with your top 3.
Well, I would encourage organizations, if you haven't already started to explore it, what your role is in advancing equity within your organization and within your mission, and begin thinking about what are the steps you can be taking, your commitment to that journey, and do it in a way that is authentic and, again, with intentionality, and recognizing that if you're doing something and showing up every day with that intentionality, you're on the right path, and you'll continue to do that. But doing nothing means maintaining sort of the status quo, which we know we need to start shifting, and making sure that equity and everyone can benefit from all the sort of opportunity and resources that are available. So that's my one takeaway, is to really, again, and bring the resources in to help you understand how to do that responsibly, and knowing when you start it, it'll never stop. So it's a big commitment, but really take the time to explore that within your organization if you haven't already. The other piece of it too is to, I think, what are the ways that you can be more vulnerable as leaders? And that's one thing I didn't talk about, but I think through COVID, it is, my communication and my ability to be vulnerable as a leader. You can still lead with positivity and strength, but yet be vulnerable and share what you don't know and what you do know, and the path of which you're going to figure it out, right? And that positivity and strength really, the feedback I got from employees was, just in that uncertainty, and people managed it differently, right? Whatever way they're coming in with their own experience, their own ability to sort of deal with crisis, that sort of steady ship and framework of, we may not know everything. I'm going to tell you what you know, and then what we don't know, we're going to figure it out together. And that required vulnerability and communication for me that at levels where it was constant, but really, really helped me grow as a leader. And you said 3 things. I only got 2,
All right.
Janice. I don't know.
We're not going to be too specific here.
Okay, good. I feel like I have an incomplete on that assignment.
I think we can live with that.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a good point to end the session here today. It's been so much information exchanged. It's been great. I want to thank everybody who's jumped on this webinar today with us here at McKonly Asbury. We appreciate you taking some time on your Thursday, and also want to obviously thank Dana. A wealth of information, really showed the depth of what is being done at HDC to have an impact on the community. So thanks so much, Dana.
Yes, thank you, Dana.
You are very welcome. I hope that this was helpful or engaging or gave folks ideas, but feel free to reach out to me by email or by phone if there's like a piece or a tidbit that you want to explore more, learn more about. I'm more than happy to engage. Peer support is so essential for leadership, and be able to explore those vulnerabilities or open questions where you may not have that sounding board available to you within your own organization. So I'm happy to connect with you all.
Sounds great. It sounds absolutely fantastic. And we're going to move forward. Path forward is to our next CEO Perspectives in Challenging Times, session 2. And we had a little bit of a preview earlier here in that we're going to talk about, we're going to talk with Joe Arthur, Executive Director of the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank, on August 11th at 2 p.m. You can also subscribe to our blog. You see that on the screen as well. And go to there and subscribe and also register for the upcoming session 2. I think that's it. Janice, do you have anything else?
No, we hope you all enjoyed it today, and we look forward to seeing you potentially on August 11th. Thanks so much, Dana. That was wonderful.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.